Do we all remember the great water main break of 2021? It was a great time. I was 5 months into my stay here, just 5 months in, and all of a sudden, just boom, no water. And it happened on, it's burned into my brain. It was traumatic for me. It happened on Friday, of course, classic. And everyone started worrying about things, of course, but my brain went exactly where you think a pastor's brain would go, straight to the toilets. I was just like, how in the world are we going to flush a toilet? Because I knew what was coming up that weekend. We had a quinceañera that next day. We had a baptism the next day, and then all the weekend masses. So I'm like, we're about to have 400 people at least come through our doors, and I have no way to flush a toilet. This is going to be bad. So yeah, me and Pam were just struggling to find some porta potties like crazy. We got them though, we got them. But then again, it's all the other difficulties that we ran into: showering, just brushing your teeth, drinking water, of course. It's just those simple difficulties, something that we don't even notice, the fact that water magically flows out of our faucets, magically flushes our toilets. We don't even notice it until it's gone. But we survived. We're okay. It's going to be okay. Then there was, of course, this past summer, we had the great blackout of August 2023. Another Friday night. What happens on Fridays around here? On Friday night, boom, power, gone. And I was at a family's house for dinner at that time. And so as I'm going home, I'm driving through town, and I just realized how disorienting it is. Because I'm fine driving in the dark. The lights on my car work. It's okay. But when you're going through town, you're just completely disoriented because you're used to having, that lamppost there, or that house always has the porch light on, or it's just very weird. It's very eerie. But we made it. It's only a couple hours. We all made it through that one too. The one we almost didn't make it through happened this past December, which was the great outage of MTC when the internet went down. And of all the outages, that one was the worst. It lasted a whole 3 hours, and we almost died, but we made it, just barely. It's the other, December 20th, burned into my brain too. Okay, so it's these experiences of disconnection. Okay, that's what we're getting at. These experiences of taking something absolutely for granted. Here's this connection in our life. Here's something just flowing into our lives. We hardly even notice it, barely notice it day to day until it's not there. It's when we realize that it's not there, then we realize just how absolutely essential it was to our life. Water, electricity, the internet. We just expect it to be there. But once it's gone, we realize, oh man, life really gets out of balance once those things are gone. We realize how our lives don't really function without those connections. We recognize that nothing else in life, especially when the internet goes down, but nothing else in life is important until we can reestablish those connections, get that fixed. Until we start talking about God. And then it's just like, all bets are off, and we're talking about a completely different thing that doesn't even count, apparently. So on your sheet, if you grabbed a sheet as you walked in, I know I love my handouts, but like if you grabbed one as you walked in, it's okay if you didn't. You're going to survive today, don't worry. On the back of it, under the notes section, there's a simple question. Okay, and I want us to think about this question as we begin, because it's the question is, how connected do I feel to God? So I want us to just zone in on ourselves real quick. Take a deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. Just kind of tune into your own body, tune into your own mind. It's going to be okay. And then just honestly ask yourself the question. I'm serious. Honestly ask yourself the question, how connected do I feel to God? Just take us just in through the nose, out through the mouth. How connected do I feel to God? And just allow the honest answer to come to your mind, okay? No shame. Just ask yourself. Because for some of us, maybe the answer is, I don't know. Cool. Just be honest. For some of us, the answer is, Father, I feel very connected to God. Cool beans. Great. Just be honest. One guy over at Bushton this morning said when we asked this question, he's like, Father, the answer that I got was, I feel like I'm connected, but it's like a really long extension cord, and I think it should be a lot shorter. I'm like, cool, great, that's very honest, thank you. If you asked me, when I was like in high school and college, the answer I would have given you is, well, my family prays the rosary every day together, and we go to Mass every Sunday. It was like, I didn't ask what Jesus things you do. I asked, how do you feel? Like, how does this connection with God feel? How connected do you feel to God? Because, this is one of those simple but essential questions. Think of the examples again. When we're not connected to water, or we're not connected to electricity or the internet, we feel that sucker immediately. It's just like, boom, what happened? We immediately feel it. But then we get to this question of, well, do we feel that in our connection with God? Do we feel that sort of are we as aware, are we as attentive, are we as perceptive when it comes to our connection with God? And this is the big one. If and when I lose my connection with God, am I as frantic to get that back as when I lost the internet or electricity or water? Is my connection with God something as essential to my life as my utilities? It's because of questions like these, because of these experiences we have in our day-to-day life. That's why we've put together this year, instead of rerouting, it's reconnecting. Right? This 10-week series we start today as we go towards Easter about that connection that we have with God. Why? It's because that question of our connection with God drives at something central and essential to our life of faith, which is our relationship with God. I feel like sometimes I just stand up here and repeat myself, but I'll repeat it again. The reason that we show up here isn't so that I can try to convince you that God exists. The reason that we show up here isn't because we have to, because it's the church teaching that we have to go to Mass on Sundays. The reason that we show up here isn't for I hope it's not any of those reasons, as good as those things can be. The reason that we show up here, and what the church teaches us, is that none of those other things even matter unless we are first in a vital and personal relationship with the living and true God. And that relationship is called prayer. Okay, none of it matters unless we're first in a vital and personal relationship with the living and true God. I stole that from the Catechism. That's not my cool insight. That's just like basic church teaching. None of the other things matter. Our beliefs, our rules, the morality, none of it really even matters unless the first brick, the first thing we have to have established. Am I in this vital and personal relationship with the living and true God? The objection that I get is, well, Father, I just don't really think God's listening to me. I don't really feel his presence. He doesn't seem to care. And again, this is great. Be honest. Please be very, very honest. Because if you have an experience like that, you're in very good company. There was this guy in the history of the church. His name was Augustine. He had the exact same experience. He's now Saint Augustine, so you're in great company. But Augustine had that same experience of looking for this relationship, connection, whatever you want to call it, with God. For so long, decades of his life, he was looking for it. Until eventually one day it hit him like a ton of bricks. And then he wrote this. He said, he was talking to God. He said, late have I loved you, O beauty, ever ancient, ever new. Late have I loved you. You were within me, but I was outside, and it was there that I searched for you. Okay, what's Augustine getting at? He says, late have I loved you. Not late have I believed that you exist. Late, have I obeyed your commandments. None of that. It's late have I loved you. Again, late have I been in this relationship with you. It took me a long time to get here, God. But he finally got that key brick. And then what did he say? Where was he looking for God all those decades? He says, what? Outside is that's where I was searching for you. So outside of himself. And he was outside of everything. He was looking for God. If you know Augustine's story, he was looking for God in his career, in his work, in money, in sex, and in all the other things that you can imagine. That's where he was looking for it. And that's what he says, outside. That's where I was searching for you. But what does he realize? What hit him? You were within. That's where you were you were within. It's difficult, but they finally got, have we ever seen the movie Silence of the Lambs? This is not a kid's movie. Don't show your kids this movie. Okay, I'm going to caveat this one real quick. There's this beautiful scene in there. It's a dark movie, but it's brilliantly insightful. But there's this scene in there where one of the protagonists, Hannibal Lecter, he's talking to the FBI agent, trying to help her figure out, who the serial killer is and all this sort of stuff. Great. But he asks her that question, what is it that's motivating this killer? He's trying to get her to see it. And she's guessing all these things, it's his anger, it's his need for acceptance, his frustration. And Hannibal points out to her, no, that's not what's going on. What's going on? This guy's doing all these things because he covets. He covets. And how do we begin to covet, Clarice? Do we choose to covet? He says, no, we begin to covet what we see. It's a weird example, I know, but it gets at the point that so much of our attention, so much of what drives us in the weirdest places is just where our attention has been placed. Why do you think advertisements work the way that advertisements do? Did you know your phone's designed to get you to look at it a lot? It's literally designed to get you to look at it. It's like where we focus our attention is where our attention is. I know that sounds like stupid, but where our attention is, that's where our attention is. And for Augustine, for so much of his life, he placed his attention anywhere that his attention was drawn. And he never took the time to recognize and to realize God was just sitting there waiting for him the whole time. God was within, just simply waiting for him. The God, the creator of the stars, all of it, we don't have to attract his attention. We don't have to figure out clever ways to get God to notice us. There's not a magic formula to our prayers so that God will finally be able to hear us. God's just waiting for us. He's waiting for us to tune in, to reconnect. Augustine, in another book that he wrote, he says, God is interior intimo meo. It's Latin. He says, God is closer to me than I am to myself. That's how close God is to us. The church says the heart is the place of encounter with God. If you want to go find God, you don't need to go climb the mountains. He's just waiting, just simply waiting for us. So reconnecting these 10 weeks is not going to be me like giving you for 10 weeks, teaching you magical formulas and super cool techniques to get in touch with God. Like that's not going to get you dialed into God or something. That's not what we're doing these 10 weeks. That's not what it's going to take. Reconnecting is 10 weeks of discovering, of attending to, of becoming much more perceptive, of learning to pay attention, of reconnecting with the God who's simply sitting there waiting for us already. We just have to take our attention off of the things we always give it to and place it once again on God. So in order to do this, like I mentioned, and like we did last year with rerouting, we'll have the weekly homilies, yeah. We'll also have that deeper dive video that'll come out on Wednesdays. So just the homily again, but it's just some extra commentary on it. Great. But then a helpful thing to do is to gather with a couple of friends and just go through this together. It's good accountability, because instead of saying, well, I'll get around to it, your friends will call you up and be like, you were supposed to be here. You're like, crud, yeah, I'll get there, just a second. It gives us good accountability, but it helps us to do the work. A lot of you have this built-in small group and group of friends called your spouse. You also have some kids sometimes, You could discuss this at dinner. That'd be cool. Or even if you just hate people so much, fine. You can do it yourself. The point is, we have to do the work. I can stand up here and wax on all day, but at a certain point, each one of us has to take the responsibility and do the work ourselves. The greatest spiritual gurus in prayer, they're going to tell you, right, you don't need all the secrets, you just need to start. You will start to figure it out along the way. If you want a prayer life, just begin to pray, and we'll work it out from there. We have to do the work. The goal of this all then, it's summed up in one of my favorite stories. It's from the Desert Fathers. Right? So the younger monk goes to the older monk, and he's like, I think I'm missing something, man. You got to help me out, because I'm doing all my prayers. I'm fasting, I'm doing my meditations, I'm doing the stuff I'm supposed to do, but it's not clicking, something's off. That's us, we're like, I'm trying here, but something's still off. And then the older monk just looks at him, does this, and fire starts coming out of his hands. And he says, if you wish it, you could be utterly changed into fire. The point of this story is not we can get fire powers at the end of this. The point of this story is we could be utterly changed, utterly transformed. Like this flame of divine love, God's very life can utterly transform us. Like I know you don't hear all the prayers that I say at Mass, but like when I pour the wine and the water into the chalice, the prayer that the priest says is, by the mystery of this water and wine, may we come to share in the divinity of Christ, who humbled himself to share in our humanity. We're sharing in God's own divine life. That's a bonkers thing to think about. That's an utter transformation that happens, that humans can share in God's divinity. But that's what our faith is proposing to us, that we can be utterly changed. So if I were going to sum up, again, the goal of reconnecting, it would be this, that each one of us would make that commitment. If we haven't already, we would make that commitment to enter into that life-changing relationship. So in other words, that each one of us would commit to a daily, sincere, and authentic commitment to this prayer of the heart, which we'll talk about what that is, but this real prayer of the heart. And that for those of us that already do that, that will be renewed and re-energized in that. Why? So that simply put, everybody can deepen their relationship with God, but then be utterly transformed, utterly changed by everything that God has for us. Okay, I'll call to close with this. We're all in search of God, like everybody is, even if they don't admit it. Every single person is in search of God. But the cool news is, God's already in search of us. C.S. Lewis said it right. He's on the move. And the cool news is, he's actually already found us. As Jesus says in the book of Revelation, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If you would open, I would enter in." He's just waiting for us. Mother Teresa, she wrote this beautiful meditation based off that passage. She puts it on the lips of Jesus and she says, "It's true. I stand at the door of your heart day and night. Even when you're not listening, even when you doubt that it might be me, I'm there, waiting for the smallest signal of your response, even the smallest suggestion of an invitation to permit me to enter, just anything. And I want you to know that whenever you invite me, I will come." Jesus is waiting at the door of our heart, just simply waiting. My hope, again, for myself, for you, for all of us these next 10 weeks, my hope is that we discover a renewed connection with God. My hope is that we hear that knock of the Lord at the door of our heart. My hope is that then every time, like when we come to the Eucharist, and we say those words that we just rattle off sometimes without remembering we say them, like, "Lord, I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof. I'm not worthy that you should enter into my house, enter into my heart. Lord, I'm not worthy." That will actually mean those. To truly invite the Lord in a real and powerful way, and that our lives will then be utterly transformed.